My old St. X wrestling coach talks about making rosaries, and if you stick around, you'll get an embarrassing story about high school me on Spirit Inspire starting right now.
Broadcasting from the Cathedral of the Assumption in Louisville, Kentucky, this is Spirit Inspire. And now, here is your host.
Welcome back to another episode of Spirit Inspire. I'm your host for today, Vincent Ricketts, and joined with me, as always, is my co-host, John Soul.
Hello, Vincent. Welcome back.
No, welcome back yourself.
Yeah, I know. Awkward phrase.
Today, we have our special guest, Mr. Elliott Bauer. Elliott.
Good to see you all again.
Yeah, you too.
It's good to see you. It's always great to have friends on the show. So I guess we'll just start pretty open-ended. Turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and how you came to that.
Yeah, so I try to do a lot of things. I have a beautiful wife, 2 children, one on the way in January.
Oh,
so
congratulations.
I'm excited about being outnumbered finally. I work for a local utility company, and during the pandemic, me and my wife started a rosary company to try and keep ourselves occupied. And then I met Vincent. I had the privilege of coaching him in wrestling. I've coached wrestling at St. X for the past 15 years.
I did not know this.
Mm-hmm.
That is
You
so
didn't know
cool.
that?
No, I didn't know that.
I have really good Vincent stories.
How have I not known this?
Yeah.
This is
I may
amazing.
get to them.
Oh,
May
we
not.
need at least one story for everybody to
I
hear.
have the perfect one.
This is so.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
my goodness.
Yes.
I don't even know which one we're talking about.
That's so great.
So the me and my wife are both born into Catholic families, raised Catholic, went all the way through Catholic school here. I went to St. X. She went to Sacred Heart. We both went to U of L and got engaged after kind of a mission trip through U of L in the Philippines, and got married in 2015 and started our family in 2019. So my son was born December 6th of 2019, and then 3 months later,
Oh gosh,
the world
yeah.
shut down. So for brand new parents at a time when COVID was still big and scary, it was a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So during that time, my wife had a strong devotion to the rosary, and I did not at all. And she, in our life, we work well together because she's an ideas person and I'm a doing person. And I don't think, and she thinks all the time. So she was praying the rosary, more intensely than I think we had that she had up to that point in her life, because she was a brand new mom, brand new baby, big scary world, and we were stuck in the house together. And she started, saying, I'd really like to have a rosary for the luminous mysteries, and then a different rosary for the sorrowful mysteries, and then a different rosary for I was like, oh, that's, a good idea. Have one that fits the mood of everything. I was like, yeah,
That's cool.
Let's do that. And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, oh, we'll just buy rosary stuff, and I'm not spending $100 on a bunch of rosaries. But we have the time. We'll go and do it. So I went and just purchased kind of in bulk beginner tools and beads and stuff, and started making them. And it was something that we did at night while we were sitting around watching YouTube and not doing anything else. And I was like, oh, this is great, this is fun. And she kind of at first was like a little bit taken aback. She was like, this is like this is a special thing to me, and you're just like popping off and like going and making a whole bunch of it. And it for like a couple weeks, because we were our whole world was the 3 of us, right?
Yeah.
And eventually got to the point where like we need to sit down and talk about what this ish is, like what is actually going on. I was like, I'm making rosaries, that's not a bad thing. You're praying rosaries, that's not a bad thing. Why is there this level of discontent between us? And we're like, generally in our lives, we've found that when there is those initial abrasive barriers, to something positive, especially in your Catholic life, you're like, this is a little bit of pushback, which is generally a good thing, because if you have that little bit of pushback, you go, okay, well, we need to continue down and see where it goes. So then, instead of me making some rosaries and her praying some rosaries, we folded into each other and we started praying the rosary together. And she started, being the ideas person, designing these really beautiful rosaries. She'd pick out the centers and the crucifixes and the beads and the colors, the metal, and I would be the construction guy and go through and start piecing it all together.
Oh, that's cool.
And that organically built up where it was like, oh, we're making 3 rosaries a night. This isn't bad. We started to go through some beads, and then it was like, well, maybe we should start buying like in bulk. And then all of a sudden we started having boxes delivered, and it was like, we just bought like, 100 different centers. That means that like we could make 100 rosaries, and the spiral started to where it was like, okay, we need to figure out what we're going to do with these. Like, we just can't have a pile of these in the corner of the room. So we sat and for a long time, I was like, what do we do with this? And at that same time, in September of that year, my grandfather he was old, elderly, had health problems with COVID and everything else. It was a time where it was like, oh, we're not going to have very much longer than him with him.
Yeah.
So it was something where it was like, okay, so I started talking to him. He had gone all the way through to be a subdeacon at St. Meinrad before he left and met my grandmother and got married. So he would, he kind of, I was like, yeah, I'm making rosaries. What, he was like, I made a couple in my day. It was something that we kind of battered back and forth. And me and my wife had started to come up with ideas of, we make these rosaries that are clearly ones that we were like, we could sell these. Like, we could go and we could take these. Somebody would want this.
Mm-hmm.
And we went from that to, we have a beautiful ministry in Louisville, Our Lady's Rosary Makers, who've been around forever. They were the largest suppliers of mission rosaries in the entire world.
They still are, right?
Yeah, I think so. They've taken a little hit, but I mean, they are shipping out millions and millions and millions of worth of supplies to make rosaries all across the world. So we were like, maybe we could sell a rosary, and every time we sell one, we give one, make a mission rosary with that, and we just donate that one. Like, that's a good, one for one. That'll help and encourage people to purchase them, because like, why would they purchase ours when they could go anywhere else? And we went. And during that time, we were exploring all these things, and my grandfather took a real turn, kind of out of nowhere. And at the end of his life, there's been nobody in his family that had lived to 90, and he was 89 in like 11 months, and he was just like, I want to make it. That was, and we were looking at the whole situation. We're like, he's probably not.
Yeah.
Right? It's a near-run thing. It's probably not going to be like that. And there was, sitting around praying the rosary, thinking all these things, and I had kind of jokingly, pushed Saint Joseph a little bit. His name was Joseph, Joe Guy, and I said, "Hey, Saint Joseph, I'll make you a deal. I'll make 1,000 mission rosaries for you in your name and donate them if you let my grandfather hang on until he's 90. And instantly the answer came in, and it was not something that I rationally thought of. It was like, well, he's 90. And I was like, what? No, like, that's the whole reason I'm praying. That's like his whole thing is he wants to be 90. It was like, he's 90. And I sat around and I was like, what? And it was like, you got 9 months before you're born. It was like, oh, I guess he is 90. So then I was like, oh, geez. And he passed away like 2 days later. And so I was left with this thing where I was like, oh, now I'm in it. Like, now I'm 100% in it. So I told that story at his during his eulogy, and everybody was like, Okay, he's 90. We'll accept that. Like
That's cool.
That's something. So all this time I've been chipping away at this debt that I have to St. Joseph. That we have these boxes of just mission rosaries.
How many you?
I don't know. I quit counting a long time ago. It's not 1,000 yet. I'm still chipping away at it, but it's something where, you know, when we're sitting at night, you know, not that we have much time to watch movies anymore, but occasionally sit down, crank one out. I hunt on the weekend, sitting in the tree stand, sitting there quiet. You know, there's those opportunities, and from that we had the mission rosaries. The rosaries that we made, and the last piece of it came together because we started kind of doing the math of like, you know, we have one at the time, they're like, we have one kid and we can crank out up 2 rosaries a night. Like that's not sustainable, you know, for me to do, in addition to family, in addition to coaching and all this other stuff. So we started exploring, and we found these places, essentially liquidation companies, right, where you have so many older nuns and people who live consecrated lives, convents where they pass away and they don't do anything with their stuff. And these rosaries that they have pile up. They're broken, they're discarded, they're missing beads. And these places or these companies will go in and liquidate all that stuff. So we were starting to buy rosaries by the pound. We'd buy 15 or 20 pounds at a time. They'd come in broken and disheveled. Yeah. And started to fix them. And then, so that was like our trifecta. We had the stuff that we made that we thought was pretty. We had the mission rosaries that, you know, we were like, this is, you know, in part and parcel with it the same. And then we have these we call them rescue rosaries that we piece together. And it's like, this, you know, somebody's prayed on this for a long time, and now you're just the next person.
Yeah.
And we're like, this is great. We have our plan. We started putting a website together, and we went and we were like, we can't figure out a name. We can't figure out a name.
Yeah, I've always wondered what is behind your all's name.
So I mean, we had this plan. And then the first time we actually sold a rosary, it was none of those things. Like, it was none of the 3. We had a call. A young woman had a miscarriage and had named the child. And we had a call, and like, we want you to make a rosary with this is the center, with this is the cross. You know, we want it to be green. I was like, oh, we can do that. Yeah. Thinking it was kind of a one-off, and did it, sent it to it. And then not long after, my wife actually met this person just by happenstance in real life, and I was like, oh, I think we made a rosary for you. And this young lady just was like, that's the most precious gift I've ever had, because it was made for me. It was made for my baby. And came back, and it was like, maybe we're thinking about this all wrong. Like, why are we trying to be like everybody else and sell stuff that people may or may not want? It needs to be what they want, right?
Yeah.
So bespoke is, you know, means crafted for you, you know, specifically for you. And that's where most of our, you know, income comes from, is people now who want something specifically made for them. And we're like, you know what, if that makes you pray more or more often or whatever, if that's going to do it for you, then we're happy to do that. So that's kind of the jumping off point where we started. And then, you know, in the middle of the pandemic, we advertised on a couple podcasts. People were at home a lot, and it kind of blew up for a little bit. So it's been really fun. Then we added in kind of late in the game, we added in that we would do free repairs for everybody. We thought, like, you know, we have the tools to fix it.
What a great way to pull people in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
good
like,
business model.
This is marketing.
Yeah.
So we put that out there, and we just said basically, like, hey, you cover shipping. You pay to ship it to us, and you pay to ship it back to you, and we'll fix it for free. And people are like, well, I'm missing a bead. Well, I'm missing a cross. Well, I was like, no, I have 10,000 crosses. Like, that's not an issue. I have hundreds of thousands of beads. It's not an issue. So we started doing that, and then all of a sudden we were like, this one's coming in from England. Like, we got one from Canada. What? And then it was like, what's going on? And went and looked, and if you type in rosary repair just on Google, we're the 4th hit. And if you type in free rosary repair, we're the #1 thing on Google. And it was like, oh, that's where it's coming from.
That just
like
happened.
Yeah, it just have never paid a cent to advertise, on the internet that way, and it's kind of blown up, and that has been a huge blessing, because then you start getting woven into everybody's stories. So we had a young lady reach out like, well, I'm engaged. I'm supposed to get married on Saturday. And my fiance gave me his grandmother's rosary to pray on since we've been engaged. And I've been praying on it, and I broke it this week. She was like, can you fix it? The wedding's Saturday. And I was like, I'll fix it as fast as you can, FedEx it to us. So literally she had it delivered overnight to us. We fixed it, overnighted it back to her, and she had it for Saturday.
From where?
That one I think was in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
We had another young woman who was like, yeah, my father was in the Air Force. He was in Vietnam, and his mother had given him a rosary when he left. And like day one, he lost the crucifix. So his whole time in Vietnam and everything else, he carried around this rosary without a crucifix, and then came back and served the rest of his time. And he was going to retire. And as a surprise, she went and stole his rosary from him, sent it to us, and we attached a similar crucifix to the one he had lost.
Wow.
However many years ago.
Yeah.
And sent it back to him, and that was given to him in his retirement ceremony. So like those stories, that doesn't come from us.
Yeah.
Like we're this tiny little blip in it, but you get to experience like how for some people, like the rosary may not be the most important thing to you every single moment of the day, and it shouldn't be, because we have life that infiltrates it, and you have family and everything else. But there are specific times in your life when it is everything.
Yeah.
And during those periods of time, that's when we're like, yeah, we're here to help. Like we can jump in and aid in that.
That's amazing. I'm telling you, like the gift of what you all provide is like, it's like Mother Mary knew what you were called to do, and she had something to do with like, I'll mess with the algorithm here, get y'all up in the top place for all these people throughout the world that need that. Praise God.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thinking of the power of story too. The rosary is definitely not part of every single moment of your life, but Mother Mary is.
Right.
And she is part of it in some way. And it's like the rosary, especially for those who pray it every day, it can become like the lens through which you view your entire prayer life, your entire relationship with God. And that, I think, is why it can become so important to so many people. And even if they don't pray it, just having it. I know people who they can't bring themselves to pray because they just don't know how, or maybe they were jaded from years ago, but they won't let go of those beads.
Right.
And that's the one thing they're holding on to. And it's like holding on to the hands of mercy.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation with one of the priests in our archdiocese, and we talked about things, the unknowable stuff. But I was like, bodily resurrection. Like hypothetically, we're all gonna die, right? And then hypothetically after that, we are going to be bodily resurrected. It's like, I was like, do you think, kind of selfishly, hypothetically, like we're making somebody a rosary, and a lot of people are buried with rosaries in their hand, hypothetically. And if there's a bodily resurrection, I was like, do you think the first thing that you're going to touch when you come back is going to be the rosary? And we just kind of sat there. He was like, it's pretty interesting. He was like, I haven't really thought that much about what rosary I'd be buried with, but he was like, there's a certain sense of comfort that could come from something that you've prayed on your whole life and is familiar to you and everything else. And first breath that comes in your lungs.
You're already marketing for heaven, huh?
Business is business.
Oh my gosh, that's good. There's something to the rosary, I think, that is universal for Catholics, and yet also for many people who aren't even Catholic. They just know there's something special about those. Now, some people wear them like necklaces, and they treat it like a talisman or a good luck charm, and that's not what that is. That's not what it's meant to be. I don't know. Is there, like, what has been, like, maybe, I mean, you've shared a lot of the highlights, but what has been some of the things that have really given you a deep sense that these beads are more than just beads you're making, right? It's not just a construction project.
Yeah. So, I mean,
beyond what you've already shared, obviously.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, They're just beads, right? So there isn't anything special about them, especially when they're in our hands. They're literally just beads of metal. We sell them unblessed, and then if somebody wants to have them blessed or whatever, there's one thing. I will show this one. I didn't make this one. This is one of the ones that we were able to get, in a lot purchase. And
Can you hold it up for people to see?
Yeah. So this is we don't know for sure. It's part of the story portion of it, but this is most likely came from a soldier in World War I or World War II, right? Mm-hmm. This is the one that was standard issued to GIs when they went over, and by the U.S. government. Back then it was if you're Jewish, you got this. If you were a Catholic, you got that. Everybody got their thing, and this is the one I carry around every day in my backpack. And sometimes it's like hesitant, be like, I'm so anxious and worried about this, and then you pull it out, and you're like, you know what? This is the least consequential prayer intention that has ever been prayed on these. This is all my worries don't really particularly amount to something in that larger scheme. And does that mean you don't pray the rosary? Yeah, hopefully not. But it does put it into a sense of perspective of, maybe I shouldn't be praying specifically for this one tiny thing that's bothering me. Maybe there's much larger things that are going throughout the world every day that I should be praying for. Yeah. There's a sense of perspective, and that's part of the reason I think people like buying our rescued rosaries, is that there's it is a tie into this larger prayer group. Like there isn't, we come to Mass and we pray together, but there's a different spiritual sense when you're picking up a tool that has been picked up before by somebody else, and especially people who have rosaries passed down from their grandparents or their parents or whatever. There's something to having that connection, both with the people that have come before you and prayed on it, as well as just the act of the prayer itself.
So much to that. I have that personal experience myself because my brother got into making rosaries as well, and you've met Matt.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And he had made one for my daughter, or not my daughter, but my niece, his daughter. But he made it for me because I'm her godfather. Mm-hmm. But he inscribed her name on the back of the crucifix, and I'm like, I'm gonna pray this on these beads, and then one day I'll give this to her as a gift, and. These are little ways that people find those deep connections.
Right. Yeah, we've had lots of people that have, whether it's given us great ideas or they're executing these great ideas. Where there's a family, God bless them, they're a fertile group. Every time that they have a kid, we've made 3 of them so far. Every time they have a kid, generally their kids are saints' names, and they'll get that saint as the center, and we'll make them a rosary. And their plan, I don't know, hopefully I'm not spoiling it, hope their kids aren't old enough to figure it out anyway, but they're going to pray on those rosaries, especially if my child's struggling with something. They'll grab that kid's rosary and pray on them, and then when they get married, or at some point, when they're an adult, they're going to gift that to them. And it's at that point, we're giving you a rosary. Okay. We're giving you a rosary that for the past 20-something years we have prayed on intentionally for you. So,
I'm stealing that idea.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it? It's a good one. I mean, there's not a ton. We don't, as Catholics, we don't have a ton of physical things that are either teaching tools or things that pass on. We don't have we don't have a real chalice in our house. We don't have a real paten. We don't have a monstrance. We don't have those physical things that are in church that we can go to. But we do have, the rosary specifically is one of the biggest things that is a physical teaching tool for your children. And then as they grow older, can be, your entrance into, hey, congratulations, now you're an adult. Yeah, now you have real worries to pray about. Now you have, and here's this wonderful tool that I've imparted, with 20 years of prayer for you.
So much grace flows from that. It's a gift. It's a gift.
So I'm not saying that everybody that has a baby should buy a bespoke Catholic rosary, but those options are available to you.
It's a good pitch.
I really do appreciate the physical aspect of the rosary. And really, I mean, it ties in with really our understanding of the goodness of the body and all, because it's like it's a tactile experience that also correlates with a spiritual experience or a prayer experience. Although I don't want to speak. I don't want to speak like I know more than I know, because I've actually always struggled with the rosary very much, and I may have mentioned that on the show before.
You did with Father
sure.
Whalen, Father Dan Whalen.
But it has always been a struggle for me, continues to be, and thankfully I think an active struggle. I've not given up,
Right.
but it's like the mind wanders and I kind of feel like I'm just sort of saying words.
Right.
What do you say to that kind of person?
Well, so that's, this is not, there's no mandate that you have to pray the rosary, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes we can be put in a position where it becomes a burden, or it becomes something
Sure.
where it's like, I haven't said a rosary today and I got to fit it in and I have to really speed through and do whatever. You're praying. There's never any, there's no bad news that comes from that. But it's one of those things where as time evolves, at some point it's going to hit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether that happens and it makes an impact on you one day, and then every day after that, you're like, oh, this is a great source of peace for me, or this is a great expression of my intentions, or if it's something that's just there with you. Like, that John was talking about earlier. Some people carry it around in their pocket. I'm not somebody, I feel like I live a very busy life, and there's a lot of days that I don't pray the rosary. Not that I don't want to. It's just that, everybody's got stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that every single day, this rosary is in my backpack and is available and open.
Yeah.
So there are absolutely days where it's just like, I've been met, at every turn with struggle, or I'm really conflicted, or I'm if you flee to it in the times when you're the most anxious or stressed or whatever, that's what it's there for.
Yeah.
There's never any negative to it. So, it's something that it's meant to grow with you. It's not meant to be, something that's a burden for you. You're like,
Yeah.
59, like I have to go through, 53 Hail Marys and 6 Our Fathers. Like, oh gosh, that's a lot. Well, if you go through and you speak through that, I think I've seen people do a record or, on YouTube, the 12.5-minute rosary.
Oh my gosh,
out.
I can't even
It's like,
keep up.
I'm winded at the end of all that, where, there's sometimes, especially, and everybody's at a different place in their life. I had a great experience a couple weeks ago. Me and my family were going down to our cabin, hour and something drive. I have a 4-year-old, son in the back. And we were driving, and I was like, you know what? I was like, hey, bud, we're going to pray the rosary on the way down. And he was like, can we call Mom? I was like, absolutely. So I call her, and I was like, hey, me and Zeke are going to pray the rosary, and you want to join? She's like, absolutely. So we had a family rosary, on speakerphone as we were driving, and he was, going along in the background. I was like, this is what, this is a proud dad moment. And then, like, a decade in, he's like, how long is this? Like, how many more do we have? And I was like, you know what, bud? As long as you just sit back and you be quiet, like, you don't have to say everyone, okay. And then he got quiet for a little bit, and then he joined back in, and then he was real excited to do the prayers at the end. And it was like, you know what? That's,
that's where he's at.
That's where he's at. And it's the same thing where if you're a person and you pray and you struggle with it, you shouldn't ever feel burdened like, I'm not getting anything from this, because if you do or you don't, it doesn't matter. It's prayer.
Well, and I think when I said that last time, because I've been like, I don't think I articulated my question to Father Whalen well enough, because I think he understood my question to be something like, or what I said to be something like, well, I just don't get anything out of the rosary. And I don't like to talk about prayer that way, because prayer's not really something you're
Yeah,
supposed
it's
to
not
get something
just
out
that.
of.
Yeah.
Like prayer is not about you. It was more, when thinking about prayer, you have very often there's intention, right? So what I'm praying for, why I'm praying, and then there's attention, to the best of my ability, directing my heart toward the Lord, and those two are good and a part of it, but then all prayer is supposed to be directed towards a union. And so I think my difficulty with the rosary is I can do the intention, but then it becomes a box checking experience.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And the attention part like may or may not be there for some part of it. But like what I really want when I pick up a rosary, was like I just like want to call mom.
Right.
And maybe that's, I mean, I think it's kind of the point.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to call mom, but then I'm like, it's like you pick up the phone, but you don't really know what to say, and so there's just this kind of like awkward sign. I mean, that's been my experience with it.
I mean, I talk to my parents frequently. Not every day, but extremely frequently. And there's a lot of times like, hey, what's going on today? You just checking in? All right, we'll talk to you later. Love you, bye. There's that interaction with my actual parents. It's not to say that that's not exactly what you're doing. Like sometimes all you gotta do is reach in your pocket and touch them. Like you're there.
Yeah.
Parents are always there. We have it available.
Yeah.
That kind of relationship to it.
There's something to that. I appreciate what you said too, because I call my dad more often than I call my mom, and that's partly because mom doesn't always answer her cell phone and things like that. But it's also maybe there's that father-son relationship that's so different. I wouldn't say it's natural more than a mother-son relationship, because she's the one who carried me in her womb for 9 months, right? But there is something to that relationship that's different. And like, how do you have a conversation with your mom if you're not used to doing that on a regular basis? Mm-hmm. It's like the same with Mother Mary. Like, it's just, I guess, getting into the habit. Because I do have good conversations with my mom when I'm intentional about calling her.
Yeah.
And it's usually really great. Now, if I try to call her every day, it might get more difficult.
Right.
What do we talk about, right? And that might be what this feels like.
And I mean, speaking of like the 12.5-minute rosary, right? If you're like, I'm going to pick up the phone, call mom, but I'm going to spend as little time and energy and attention on this phone call as possible. I mean, she's going to notice, and that's not good for anybody, her or you or anything. So, that's a thing there too. But actually, now that you say that about the father-son relationship and the mother-son relationship, because like I don't have, for whatever reason, I have the struggle with the rosary, but I have no problem, like praying to Jesus. Very little problem praying to God the Father. Mental prayer is a daily practice for me. But like for whatever reason, like the rosary, and I don't know, I'm doing that consecration to the Immaculate that we're doing with FRP. Have we mentioned that on the show?
No, not yet. I mean, we started November 5th. It goes to December 8th. When this airs, it may be after the consecration itself. So if you hear about this at this point, it's never too late to jump in and pick a different feast day. And the booklets are on, I think, FRP's website and other places. But Gabby After Hours, his YouTube channel, Gabriel Castilla, he was interviewed by Matt Fred. He's the one who's been promoting this, and you can look him up.
It's the Maximilian Kolbe.
It's the Maximilian Kolbe consecration, which is
really
cool.
Good. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've gotten to take a look at that at all.
I haven't.
But no. I struggled with the Louis de Montfort one a few years ago when I did it.
It's a tough one.
with Lucia, and I was like, I can't. just the way he writes and stuff was like, I was like, but this is very straightforward, and so
we did. There was I do the St. Joseph chords, or the chords of St. Joseph, whatever.
What is that?
Yeah.
So that is a different kind of consecration. It's kind of fallen. It used to be extremely popular. There was a nun that started it. She was had cancer in the 1700s, I think. Had a vision saying that she needed to pray or to tie a simple cord around her 7 knots on it representing the 7 sorrows of St. Joseph and pray them every day. And it cured her. And then it kicked up, it became extremely popular. Church immediately outside of Vatican City got designated the home for it in Rome. And there was a Cathedral of St. Joseph, I think it was in Wisconsin, that got designated the home here. And it was another thing that kind of stumbled out of kind of the COVID extra time at home thing. But I also coach young boys at wrestling, and the entirety of the St. Joseph cord is rooted in chastity, which is rooted in living the time and the space of your life that you're supposed to be living. So, for single men, it's I'm chaste, I might date or whatever. Or for young men, on the wrestling team, it was, you're a student. So yeah, you might have a girlfriend, but you're not doing anything else. You're not drinking, you're not smoking, you're not driving your car fast, you're not doing stupid stuff on the weekend. And that morphed into, okay, we have to kind of have parameters around it. So the cord itself is just a simple linen cord, and but it's generally physically on you 24/7. And that is another one of those physical reminders, right? So if somebody's struggling with any kind of addiction, alcoholism, anything like that, to have a physical reminder, whether it's a bracelet or a necklace or a cord, to have that on you at all times, it is an additional layer. That's more than just, I'm trying to do this. Yeah. So we offered this to all the boys. I did it. I said, hey, look, I'm going to go in the corner every day after practice, and I'm going to pray the 7 sorrows of St. Joseph. If you want to come, you can come. And then, we had a couple kids trickle in, and it was like, okay, boys, here's what we're going to do. If you are here and you do this consistently, and I know that you're serious about it, after a month, I'll give you a cord, and you can tie it on yourself and you can wear it. And then it was like, I don't just get it. And I was like, no, if you're gonna earn it, like, you have to be committed to it, right? Yeah. This is a commitment to living a chaste life. It's a commitment to doing what you're supposed to be doing in this phase of your life.
It's not a lucky charm.
Right. Oh, okay. So went through and had a decent sized group stick with it. More than I was surprised. I think we had nearly 10 kids.
Wow. On the wrestling team at St. X. That's cool.
The first year we did it, yes. And so I talked to Father Martin Lineback, and I said, hey, they're supposed to be blessed. And, these, I'm kind of acting like these are little novices right now. I'm going to see how many of them actually stick it out. But they did. All of them did. And, so it kind of towards the end of the season, I talked to Father Martin. I said, hey, can you meet? Can you bless these? And we actually got to go to Holy Family Parish right up the road from St. X. And I took the kids. We met Father Martin. We went up on the altar. Everybody put their cords out. He blessed. So it was a beautiful ceremony. Wow. I was like, this is really cool. This is really cool. And then, I coach kids for 4 years. Like, the 4 years, they go like this. I've seen a lot of kids come and go. And have, some years it's been 10 kids, and some years it's been 2 kids, and some years it's been 0 kids. It's kind of fluctuated back and forth. And I never really, was like, this is, it's kind of like with a lot of things that I do in my life. Like, I'm just sprinkling seed around and just see, like, what's actually going to take. And I was like, this is one of those things that was very fruitful for me, and I really enjoyed it. But, I don't think that it's really catching on. When you're a high school age boy, chastity is a very difficult thing to wrap your mind around, especially in today's culture. And had one of my wrestlers come back. He's in college right now. And, all the guys like, you got a girlfriend? You got what are you doing? And I was just jokingly, I was like, you gonna become a priest? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I don't have a girlfriend. I'm not, I don't know what I want to be right now. I was like, it's all right. And he goes, but I still got my cord. Pulled it out. I was like, whoa, okay. So, I don't care if everybody else dropped it. If you're wearing that in college, that's it. That's all the work is done.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
that's
so
grace.
This is a one tiny little thing. So it doesn't, with everything else, we all don't have to have like some earth shattering thing to move the world. Like I chipped in my little tiny piece here, and you chipped in your tiny little piece here, and we'll all, progress up together.
Yeah, and I think there's a spiritual symbolism of you coaching at St. X for wrestling, because that's where the Our Lady's Rosary Makers started.
It is, yeah.
And there is something profound about St. X, and it's like the biggest Catholic high school in the Archdiocese. A lot of legacy. It's been around for 100 some odd years, and so it's got a lot of history, and it's seen a lot of the history of the Archdiocese of Louisville, uniquely compared to most any other institutions. And I think of like they're like the Israel, right? Think of Jacob wrestling with the angel. And is that not what you're talking about with the wrestling match you have, as you even try to get used to praying the rosary? I think we all have to wrestle with the demands and the commitments of daily prayer in those ways. And when you inspire these young men to do that, I mean, that's such a foreign idea that most people don't tell them or share with them at all. And they're hungry for it.
Well, see, I think... And I'm going to get off on a wrestling tangent. So if you start having flashbacks, you just let me know.
Oh no! I was doing that on purpose. I want that story.
Good grief.
But we won't get into it right away. But the thing about wrestling that I think appeals to a lot of young men and young women now. We have KHSAA approved women wrestling as well. But there is no excuses, right? So if you go back to Jacob wrestling the angel, there was not, an official, there was not a referee, there was no points being tallied. There's these two entities and they're struggling, and it's going to be abundantly obvious at the end of it who the winner is, right? So it's the same thing when we have just this high school sport of wrestling. We're going to have two people go out and they're going to wrestle, and it's going to be abundantly obvious who the winner is. And the humility that you have to take on to say, I lost, that guy is better than me, is one of the most sought after things that we're missing in our society, because everybody's like, you did a good job, it's all great. No, I thrive on being the coach that is firmly rooted in realism and say, no, you sucked. You went out. I had parents come over and it's like, what happened out there? I was like, well, your kid's bad at wrestling. And you get these parents like, it's like, well, but he doesn't lift weights, and he doesn't watch what he eats, and he doesn't practice on the weekends, and he doesn't practice in the off season, and he just went up against somebody who does those things and is committed to it long term, and it shows, right? They got destroyed. And I'm like, oh, okay. We had a conversation yesterday. We had these kids, and at the end of practice, I just said, real quick, show of hands, who thinks they're going to, place at state this year? Who thinks they're going to do well? And 4 or 5 kids, boom, right there. What are you going to, he's like, I think I'm going to get, top 4 in state. Oh, cool. Do you think you outworked everybody in the state besides the top 3 kids today? He was like, whoa, no, I didn't. I was like, then you either have to adjust what you think of yourself, or you have to adjust the work going in. And it's the same thing. It goes all the way down to like your Catholic life. Like, my Catholic faith isn't strong, or my faith life, my prayer life isn't strong. You do anything about it? Like, it's, very few of us are Paul, right? Like, we're just hanging out, and all of a sudden it's just open to you, right? For almost everybody else, you have to keep trying and working, and you have a lot of those fruitless conversations, or you have the fruitless prayer, and you're like, oh, what is going on? Well, assuming that you continue to do it, something fruitful will happen at some point in the future. But if you stop, and that's the end of it, and then you're just hoping for a lightning strike to come down on you.
It's not just that, but it's that as we go on in our lives. I mean, I forget which saint said this, but it's a real brick over the head about a man, a 5-year-old who acts like a 5-year-old. No big deal.
Makes
right?
sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
A grown man who acts like a 5-year-old is an idiot. Right. And so spiritually speaking, right, that plays out too. And so if we're not, the point was, total paraphrase, and I don't even remember who said this, but that if we're not making the spiritual progress, we are regressing. We're paddling upstream, and fighting the current, and you give up, you slide way back.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and so I mean, that's a real thing too. And with the fruitless prayer kind of bit, you know, I mean, one thing I've seriously had to get over the last year has been measuring my prayer life based on how I feel about it. You know, like I get, you know, I sit down to pray for an hour and I get out of it and I'm like, wow, that was terrible. That was dry and awful, and I feel whatever. It's like, but like, no, that's not the point. Like, and there's that parallel with the wrestling too. Is it's not like, how do you feel about yourself today after practice, young man? You know, it's did you outwork everybody in the state?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's very, you know, at the, you know, end of your days when you're sitting in judgment, like there's no black and white, or there's no gray. It's all black and white. You know, either I did the thing that I thought I was supposed to do, or I avoided doing the good things, or I did the bad things. You know, there's no middle ground on any of this. And a lot of the times when we have, you know, conversations, and we got to meet everybody, you know, on the road where they're at. Right. Some people need a little pat on the butt and say, you're doing a good job, you know, just keep going. But far more of us don't have to worry about where we're sleeping tonight. We don't have to worry about where we're going to get our food. We don't have to worry about, you know, existential threats to our lives or our families' lives. In general, we got it pretty good. And that can lull you into, it's like, oh, you know, my faith life is not handed to me. Like, I'm not having these great, powerful experiences. It's like, well, you shouldn't be. You know, that's not, it's not entitled to you to just have this reception of everything that you think your faith life should be, right? And if you're not putting effort into it, then, you know, where are we standing, and where are we left with?
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into the wrestling story, because I want to hear this.
Yes, absolutely.
How many rosaries do you make on average a year, and like what's the quantity?
So it fluctuates a huge amount, and you know, it's a business. So there was times that we advertised on a podcast called "What in the Dang Heck," a podcast for young Catholic women, and you know, we spent a decent chunk of money, you know, hundreds and hundreds of dollars advertising on it. And, you know, it was something that my wife felt really sure about. And I was like, you know, I'm the money guy. I was like, this is a lot of money to be throwing out there. We don't know. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, we just got 100 rosary, you know, whether it was custom requests or just purchases off our website or repair requests. It was like, okay, you know, that's a lot of work. Now, business side of it, you know, that was a lot. We did a lot of work, and then we were trying to dig out of a hole for a decent amount of time. So the repairs are, you know, we sell rosaries, you know, frequently. You know, we have spikes in the year, communion, first communion, confirmation, weddings. We're always selling ones at weddings. And so it fluctuates. I mean, you know, hundreds-ish, you know, definitely not thousands by any means.
Sure.
But the rosary repairs are the thing that, for me, is a better indication of the spiritual pulse of the nation, right? Like, because there's some people, and I've sold rosaries to people, and I appreciate their business, and they're buying a rosary for somebody that I know is like, this is gonna sit in a drawer. Like, this is not, you know, this is a gift to somebody, and it's a very nice, thoughtful gift, but it's not going to be used, right? But there's very, very, very few rosary repair requests that I think are not, you know, that's an active thing. Yeah. We do not advertise that, you know, we are, if you punch it on Google, we pop up top, but we don't advertise that. And so we can kind of gauge, you know, I'll tell you, November, I don't know whether it's people thinking of parents that have passed away, or people thinking, you know, this is the end of the year, you have a memento mori moment or something.
Or the election.
Or the election.
Right.
You know, there's some, we had a ton of rosary repair requests, and sometimes it's down to it's probably something as stupid as a Google algorithm or something throwing it up, because we'll have nothing, and then there'll be one day where my phone is like, we have 10 rosary repair requests today. Like something happened somewhere, and I don't know whether it was good or Google or what, but something happened and they all came through.
For God using Google for good.
Yeah.
It's something. Okay, that's important, because I think people got to remember that you're operating a business. It's not a nonprofit.
It is not a nonprofit.
It's not a ministry.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that we started, really trying to deal with at the beginning is, we're not Our Lady's rosary makers, right? We were kind of selfish at the beginning. We're like, we don't want to board, like, kind of influencing what we want to do. Like, this is our thing, and we want it to see if it proves out on its own merits. With more kids, we're being blessed by more children in our life. Our free time is rapidly disintegrating in front of us. So there are things like there's more rosaries that are out of stock on our website now than it was in the middle of COVID, like 100%. And whether or not in the future it'll be like, if the business, eventually it was like, okay, this doesn't make business sense and it's losing a bunch of money and we don't have time to do it. I can see potentially that, being spun off or sold or something done with it. But the repair stuff, I don't think I'm ever going to give that up, no matter what.
No, I think that's spiritually significant.
Yeah. There's something, and we fumbled into everything. Like that we have no master plan or we have no master machinations, but the repair portion of it has been hugely satisfying for us.
That's beautiful. It's kind of what I feel like about this podcast. We kind of stumbled into this, so we didn't plan to do this. God orchestrated it, and now it's like, I love doing this because we get to meet and talk about things. I mean, I've known you for several years, and I've never known this stuff, about you or how it all came to be. And also, I had no clue about this whole wrestling situation. So, can we?
I definitely told you.
If you mentioned it, I definitely mentioned it. You got to connect the dots.
At least when this episode got booked.
Okay, well, that's great. Guess what? Now I want to hear the story.
Want to hear the story? Okay. This is a great story.
Oh, I don't even know what you're about to say.
Yes.
So, Vincent struggled a little bit in wrestling. Do you want to explain why you always smelled like peanut butter?
What?
Well, now I have to, because if you just leave it there, it's going to be even weirder. I always smelled like peanut butter because I'm a type 1 diabetic, and my blood sugar would go low, and I would have to eat spoonfuls of peanut butter to correct it. And then the person I was wrestling with would always complain.
He complained?
Which I don't think there's anything to complain about, but...
Peanut butter's not an overly bad smell. But so when awesome. There's I know that now. Let's just say that. I know that now. When he was a freshman, he got put in a position where I was a coach of the JV team at the time, and St. X sends their JV team to varsity tournaments.
Okay.
We have enough kids, and there aren't JV tournaments every weekend. And we do send our JV to these varsity tournaments to get that high level. And a lot of times they go get smacked, but you have that experience gained. And frankly, I got a lot of freshmen on my team. I don't know everyone by name and their backstory and everything else. So, Vincent, it's just like, first time he had ever wrestled for me, it was a dual tournament, which means the St. X team has 14 guys and the other school has 14, and we match them up and they wrestle one at a time, and then we total the points at the end. It's like the closest to like a basketball game or something you could get. And so you have the whole St. X team on one side, the whole opposing team on the other side, and everybody's cheering for this one match that's going on. So everybody's really engaged in it. The parents and everything is great. So he comes over and is like, Coach, just so you know, I'm diabetic. So, if my blood sugar starts dipping, I was like, well, don't worry about it. If it happens, we can take a time out. We can deal with it, whatever. So the head coach at the time had several sons. One was wrestling on the team with Vincent, and then he had a younger son who was, 9 or something. He'd gotten drug along all day, right? So as a reward for him being drug along, his mom had given him $1 and said, go buy something at the concession stand. And at the beginning of the day, he went and bought one of those white Airheads, right? night, and
Okay.
he'd taken this white airhead and did like kids do, and took it all down to the bottom and opened it and rolled it in a ball. And he'd been playing with this ball. It was a toy. He played with it all day long, slicing it, rolling it on the ground, everything. So we were in the middle of this duel, and it's Vincent's opportunity
He knows what's
to
happening.
represent.
No, I go on.
He probably blanked out. He probably-
Blacked it out.
So I know what you're about to say because Eric told me that you told him this story,
Yeah.
but I have Eric Huff, but I have no memory of this at all. So go on.
This is a combination
Definitely.
of freshman fear and everything else all wrapped together. So Vincent was wrestling, and he was a big, strong freshman and had a decent feel about him, and it was like, oh, this is a winnable match for us. This is pretty good. This is going to be good. He's a freshman. And he was wrestling back and forth, and then all of a sudden I start seeing like like something's wrong, and in my head I was like, he's an out of shape freshman. Get out there, hurry up! And then I was like, wait, is this the kid that told you he was diabetic? Are you on a diabetic kid? Oh no, this is not.
No.
And then I was like, time out. And that's not a thing. Like, you don't have timeouts in wrestling. And the officials kind of look at me, and I was like, he's about to keel over. He's diabetic. And then he's like, whoa, okay, stop. So he came over and he's like, Coach, I have a little bag, or I have some. And he was trying to communicate, and I was oblivious, had no starting information at all. And he was big, I need sugar. And we're like, where's the bag? All the parents are rummaging through backpacks, and nobody can lay their hands on it. And the official is like, hey, you gotta, this is abnormal. You gotta do something. And they were like, he needs sugar. And the coach's son pulls out this dirty, hairy, white airhead ball.
Oh, gosh.
And I was like, no, don't. And just that time,
no.
pops it right in his mouth.
What?
And then just walks back out. And I was like, either the kid's an idiot, or that is just like the most hardcore wrestler in the world. Because he just put something that should not have been in any human.
Dude, that's
and went
amazing.
out and ended up losing the match.
That's the worst
And,
part.
yeah.
What?
And he came over, and we, at the end of it, we had to get a short conversation of like, hey, from now on, like, I think I said, that's on me. I should have been better prepared for the possibilities that could have happened. And so I remember the whole rest of the day, I walked around and I had his bag that had sugar pills or something else sitting around it. I had it at my side during every duel when he was wrestling.
Oh my god!
But it was
I would black that out too, man.
that was the one thing.
I have no memory of this.
Oh my gosh. I could tell you the seat that I was sitting in. It is, there's a handful of stories that are like that, and that was always one. And back when and there was there's a certain level of like commitment to just do what you gotta do. And I mean, he had it 100%. I mean, it was to the point where like on Monday we were talking to the other coaches, and I was like, Vincent's like he's in it all the way. Like, he's fully committed.
I've been trying to think of how can I relate this to the rosary and the prayer.
Don't.
And
Just
you
let
can't.
it-
It's
just let it-
impossible.
No, just let it be its own thing.
It's its own story. I love it so much. We love you, man.
Yep.
No, I mean, it was awesome to see.
Oh man.
Well, I won't be doing it again.
Yeah.
So
We've all grown.
That's right. We're in a different place now, right? Oh man, there's so much that we could just break open with everything you're doing for the church. I mean, you have to know, Elliott, like this is so needed, and a lot of people think, oh, there's so many rosaries out there, you just take it for granted. But I just want you to know, like, it's not just the making of the rosary that is important. Like, you can make 1 billion rosaries, but if you're not doing it with heart and soul, like there's something, it will get into other people's hands, and other people will have the heart. But when the person making it is doing it with that kind of intention, there's even more fruit and more grace that can flow, because you're cooperating with Mother Mary. She's got your hand on this. It's not just something you're doing. You're doing it to make money. I know it's business,
Right.
but there is still that heart for a ministry, even if it's not officially a ministry,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Because you're a steward of the church, a son of the church.
Yeah, that's been one of the really, it's a business, but that kind of allows us to do things that, it frees our hands of everything. Nobody cares how you run your business. We don't do anything illegal. So we have lots of opportunities. I have, kind of pop-up sales, back at church when we have Our Lady of the Rosary or special mass or something. And there's the flexibility and ability. I remember we had a family come over and they were looking through all the rosaries intently. And I could kind of see, the kids were picking some out, and I could see the mom kind of flipping over the price tags on this, that, or the other. She's, no, this, kind of guiding her kids. And, so I was just acting like a salesman of a little boy. I was like, which one, if you had to pick any one, which one would you like? This one. And I could feel the mom being like, oh, what are you doing? And went to the little girl. So if you could pick any one, which one would you like? Oh, I like this. And then I asked the mom, and I was like, if you could have any one, which one would you like? And she kind of pointed at one of the very inexpensive ones. And I was like, all right, I'll make you a deal. As long as you say a prayer for us, you can all have those. And then the kids' faces just lit up, right? They're like, that's all, And then I could see the mom, she was on the verge of tears. And even though it was the actual monetary, like what that lost us was very little. I tell the people all the time, somebody was like, oh, that, that price is this price is pretty high. I'm like, well, what would you give me for it? Like, this is a free flow thing. Like, if you really want a rosary from me, if you really want it, I guarantee you're going to get it. Like, I'm not going to retire on rosary money, right? Like, there would have to be some significant shifts in our lifestyle, to make that happen. And we sat down. I'm an engineer, but by schooling, so there was a couple of times I sat down and like, to retire and how much money per hour and how many rosaries. And I was like, I'd be made, if I could crank out 3 rosaries an hour every waking day for the rest of my life, like, then we could use this as a form. You can't do that. It's not feasible. Right. So it's like, okay, then your hands are loose of it. Then you have the flexibility to do what you want to do.
Yeah. That's a steward. There's a detachment from it. That's right. A gift. Thank you for this. Yeah. It's been awesome. Truly.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to say, closing thoughts, or anything you'd like to plug?
That you haven't already?
No. No, I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to link to Bespoke Catholic in the description so that people can find you. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on. This was
really appreciate it.
A great conversation. And John knows something about me that he didn't before, that I'm willing to eat a hairy
I'll never forget.
gym floor airhead.
And so does everyone else forever, right?
Great. Yep. All right. Well, thank you again, Elliott, and thank all of you guys for sticking around. We'll see you on the next episode of Spirit and Spire. God bless you.